Hey folks, my name is Brian Douglas, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you about insights and getting involved in open source on the sort of really the focus on the maintainer side and how to sort of set up the groundwork for getting involved in open source. But it all starts with insights and knowing what's happening in the community. So looking forward to jumping in that, and also super proud and privileged to be able to come back and speak to Upstream audience again for the second time. So yeah, appreciate the invite, and let's just jump right in. Cool. So yeah, these are my slides, and just gonna shout out that a lot of my examples come from the project that I maintain, which is called Open Sourced, pathway to find your next open source contribution. We really just want to build a pathway for a community of folks who want to get involved in open source, but we also show folks how to engage with other projects and how to make contribution. Because I think a lot of that stuff is just not taught properly. A lot of tools, a lot of blog posts and stuff like that out there, but it's all quite disjointed, and it's all up to the individual contributors to figure it out. So just trying to build that pathway. Excellent. And then I spoke last year and talked about HPCUs. I'm going to briefly just remind folks about HBCUs if you're not familiar. Historically black colleges and universities. These are colleges in the United States that post-slavery they were established to educate Black Americans and provide them skills. Started with Booker T. Washington, started Hampton University, and it was all built around hospitality and how to get people integrated into society through working through hotels and restaurants or in homes. And that was really the goal and the skill set. And I I know we're like hundreds of years away from this one HBCU, but it still exists today. But I mentioned this because I think the idea of like boot camps and how folks are learning how to code today is not too dissimilar. Where now you could spend 12 weeks or 6 months or 12 months learning how to code and get a job. But the challenge is it's disjointed from learning how to code and getting your job requires actual skill. And I truly believe open source can be a pathway for folks to get on the job experience, working on a team, a distributed team, on projects that are being used by folks around the world. Which is why I'm proud to mention that the All-in Open Source program, it's concluded just last month with 25 HBCU students. And the focus there was teaching folks who are already learning how to code in school, but how to contribute to open source. So they had interactions with maintainers and with GitHub employees to eventually get to the point where this summer they'll start interning at GitHub, 25 HBCU students. So super happy that we've gone through this process, but I also want to mention that this was a continual process. So next year, next fall rather, we'll invite more students to come to the All in Open Source program to eventually become interns and learn how to do open source as well. So if you do open source or you want to be involved as a company, please join the community, reach out. I don't lead the project, but I felt like this was a good audience to mention the existence as well, because it seems like we know as a community that open source is valuable to career. I think that's why we're all here. We all do open source, not because of our career, but mainly because we love it. And we love interacting with community, solving code amongst folks who maybe we don't work with. So I mentioned that because there's value here. And I think a lot of times folks just don't really kind of understand that value or understand sort of the pathway to their contribution. Today I work at GitHub as the lead of developer advocacy. So we have advocates worldwide in multiple countries and focused on how to engage our open source users to leverage features like GitHub Actions, packages, Copilot. We're always looking for feedback and advice on how we can improve the product. So that's what our team does. But I'm really going to focus around my side project and all the examples that I leverage to understand open source. So open sourced, as I mentioned, I alluded to, as a pathway to your next open source contribution. And today I maintain that and lead that with a team of open source contributors. I give myself the title Chief Soft Officer. Hope you don't mind. It's tongue in cheek. But I'm really passionate about open source because that's the pathway I found myself into contributing to making contributions, but also getting my first job. I can go into way more detail of that story, but I won't to today. So I just encourage you to go to github.com/readme and then my name to read up on that story and how I got involved. But the one part of the story I will mention is how I get my first contribution, which it really just starts with I had an idea. I wanted to make I wanted to build a project using Node.js, and specifically one Node.js library that was hosted on NPM. but I couldn't figure out how to get it to work. And at the time, I didn't know how to use GitHub properly. I didn't even know the existence of GitHub issues, because that all the sort of intro to GitHub courses and training was all about this hosting your code, not opening issues. So what I did is I found the maintainer of that package that I could not get work. I found their email and their profile, and I emailed them directly. And to my surprise, they responded back to me. We ended up getting unblocked on the problem. But also, I committed upstream back to the documentation of like, okay, well, these are the steps that I missed. Let me add these to the README so that way other people won't miss out on being able to leverage this stuff. And it really just comes down to my intro to open source. It's really just about this quote right here: "If you don't got sauce, then you lost," which is why I name the project Open Sauce. And this is a Gucci Mane quote that definitely feel free to go look up the interview on Tumblr where he's asked, how do you find the sort of the secret sauce of hip hop, and being he's the godfather of trap. So I guess what I'm getting at is I built a place where I can sort of store all my secret sauce and be able to like understand how to make contribution moving forward. So I made open sauce being the project defined open source contributions. But I've recently just evolved it into something that's quite new. New for me. This is in existence. Other people are doing this, but I'm providing an open source dashboard, me and a team of other folks, where we can compare projects, but also compare our projects to find out who is contributing. Like, what does the community look like, and what does the sort of impact that contributions over time look like as well? So, like, if contribution go up and down, like, it's kind of hard to sort of digest that today unless you can use other tools, including tools like open sauce. So all this is because I wanted to solve the problem: how do I get an open source? And I think today you get all these tools and ideas of like good first issues. And if you go to github.com/any project/contribute, you'll get a list of any good first issues, documentation changes that are still up for grabs directly in a list. And I think that's great because like you have a good place to start, but I think that sort of first start still requires some sort of hand holding. And every month we have this Hacktoberfest during October. I said every month, but I meant every year in October. We have Hacktoberfest, which is a nice onboard ramp to anybody who doesn't know how to open up GitHub issues like myself. Like, we now have a pathway to learn this together in October. But the challenge is like you can do that in October, but like what happens after October, which is what I want to talk about today, which is around getting insights into the open source ecosystem. So I will just quickly go through another anecdote around the NBA. During 2020, I watched this documentary called The Last Dance, really focused around Michael Jordan's last year as a player on the Bulls. This is when he retired the second time. So for context, to anybody who follows NBA and late 90s basketball, Michael Jordan was prolific. He was like the star. He came up during the NBA Jam era. So if you've ever played any Super NES or you played an arcade, NBA Jam was this amazing game. It was basically my childhood. So I just wanted to put that in there as well. But during this era, you saw a lot of players who would just take the ball from one end of the court to the other court, and they would just basically be the sort of the showstopper player. But a lot of times what you see on TV or what you experience in basketball is actually not reality. And what we found in the last 10 years is that statistics in basketball have really been applied to the sport in a way that's kind of unprecedented. So like any years prior, where they took basically there's a concept called sprawl ball, or like if you've ever heard of the concept money ball, which they apply statistics to baseball. Statistics in basketball, they identified all shots on the court, and they found that this 1 point, 31% of the shots go in. So if 31% of the shots go in, what people started doing is they started optimizing their infrastructure, their team, and their plays to play to that one weakness on the court. Now, this is not too dissimilar, it looks like I've cut off the triangle offense, but it meant to say triangle offense there. Not sure what's happening there, but what I'm getting at is that if you know that this is where the ball is going to go in the hoop, you'll have a better idea of like where to bring more people in. So like if you have a 12th man or the weakest player on the team, which I say weakest player because like maybe they're not the star, you can insert them in the offense no matter where it is, because with the concept and what I'm getting at, so I was started off by the triangle offense and cut off, but in the triangle offense, this is actually during the Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary, this is what they actually identified the secret sauce to Michael Jordan, because he was a very good player, But until he joined an offense that had a good structure for him to constrain himself into making really excellent plays, he didn't turn into a great player until then. So in the triangle offense, you have two people on the left and right of you, so you always know there's somebody who you can sort of kick the ball out to if you're double teamed or whatnot. And I think that's the same when you think of the concept of open source. Open source, everyone has a role that can provide impact. And I think once we understand like what the system is for our projects we maintain and how we can sort of bring in community or even like offload community to other places, you have to kind of like take a step back and understand like what is happening in the project and then place people in the place like where there's opportunity. So I bring this up because in the NBA, which I was blown away when I looked this up because this number is like kind of crazy high thanks to inflation. But the minimum salary for the 12th man, which there's 5 people on the court, but you have a 12-man roster. So this includes folks who you're practicing with. Well, actually, it doesn't include the folks you're practicing with. But what I'm getting at is these are folks who sort of probably ride the bench. They don't spend a lot of time on the court, but they're very impactful because their minimum salary is $925,000 per year, which is absolutely crazy. Honestly, I didn't even think about looking that up because it was like probably half of that 10 years ago. What I'm getting at is I don't think when you look at impact, like sometimes when you see like teams like the Warriors or, well, I'm just thinking the Warriors because that's who I watch mostly. Like what they've done this year through injuries is that folks who don't really get a lot of playing time, they saw a lot of playing time this year. And what they did is they injected them into the system to the point where now we're now in the now third round of the playoffs at this point. And they did that on the back of using the entire depth of the roster. And what I'm getting at is like an open source. There's a concept that now is being more popularized, at least on GitHub. It's always been around, but the idea of a triage team. Now, the triage team it's a role. It's a role that you can use, which is called Triage on GitHub, and you can assign this role for folks just to look at issues. And when I mention this is because like sometimes when it comes to open source, you kind of can get bogged down in all this sort of administrative task, things like labeling issues, defining if this is actually a legit contribution. So if you can offload that to the system, to a team of individuals who can then basically do the first checks, that's a great on-ramp in open source. And I think I mentioned All-In Program and I mentioned some other resources because I think this is under-leveraged inside of open source just entirely. I took this original idea from the Express team, Express.js, because they started this entire process of we're going to onboard folks into open source, but we're going to start them not writing green squares, but rather make contributions through just getting issues triaged and filed and assigned and then mentioned to the maintainers or the contributing team, just to identify, hey, this is ready for contribution. And then they're also able to identify good first issues. And the insight of that is that if they're identifying good first issues, they're eventually get comfortable enough to make contribution. So in my project, all I do is set up different frameworks and systems so that way anybody who comes to contribute into open source, they have a framework and system that they can plug and play to. So like we do a triage team. We leverage this concept, this feature called linked issues. And the reason for this is because like things like Hacktoberfest, where we take a lot of contribution and like we invite more people to the community, we give them an on-ramp to make their first contribution with help from our bot, basically. So if someone makes a contribution to the project with the PR and it has no issue, we actually fail through CI and say, hey, there's no linked issue. And the reason for this is because if we wanted unsolicited contribution, it would probably just be kind of chaos and go off the rails pretty quickly. So we want to create like a barrier to entry, but also notification for that barrier. So if you do open up an issue open up a PR with no issue, you're then politely suggested to open up the issue before opening up the PR. And like we will accept the PR if the issue is open. And it's just mainly it's a precedent because like all our documentation is automated. So if you don't have any linked issues or if you don't have a conversation of like why this PR exists, chances are you're probably not going to come back for your good second issue, or you're not going to join the community for the long term. So from my research, my firsthand research, what I'm seeing is now that people who go through the process and learn the ropes of doing open source through a guide, which our guide right now is the PR compliance GitHub action, created by one of my contributors, it now invites people back because now they have expectations of, okay, if I open up this PR, the first person that's going to talk to me, or maybe the first person that's going to yell at me, is a bot. And I think I can react with that bot and not be sort of unnerved about how I can make a contribution to a project I've never made a contribution to. So basically, getting it like putting up the guardrails through contributing MD is like a good first step, but through a little like automation, just to sort of push people in the right direction, it changes the game a ton, pun intended. So the OSS, the open source system, the system really starts with you want to find out like who's contributing to your project. And I think on GitHub, there's some good insights into figuring out what that is. So we have the contributing block on the sidebar. We also can go in the insights tab, see where contributions are coming from, see where sort of more contributions are coming from a comparison to other folks in the project. This is a good insight to sort of identify, okay, who's contributing? Who should I reach out to? Who are my leaders in the project? Who can I find mentorship from? As an outside contributor, like this is the first place I look to if I'm looking for a conversation with maintainers. I'll look in the top contribution list. The challenge, though, is like this list isn't always true to who's actually truly contributing, because like the list on the right, the sidebar, it's organized from most contributions, which usually what happens when we see like projects like Redis, like their instigators or their most contributors are people who were at the beginning of the project, not necessarily people who are still contributing. So that could be challenging to look to. Like other insights and tabs can also provide better insights. But when I go into more details of like trying to figure out more contribution insights, I can filter down this list. And I didn't know this until this year, but you can actually highlight the contribution graph on your insights tab to actually narrow it down to contributions in the last year or last month. So that's just a free tip for you if you didn't know that, because I didn't know that until this year, until I asked. But now you can then narrow down contributions to find, okay, so Tim or I can't pronounce most of these names, but Steven's just below Tim. You can see, okay, these are the top 6 contributors in the last month. Like these are folks maybe I can reach out to for mentorship or questions and get answers from. So this is a good first step, but what I'm looking to build with open source is this. So this is a contributions filtered by in the last 30 days, but it also provides churn and sort of impact as well. So the one thing I'm just going to point out is in the last 7 days, there's a highly impactful individual who's made some contributions, and it's this guy right here. And like this is a nice piece of insight to identify things like bus factor. And now bus factor, if you're not familiar, it's if someone in the project gets on a bus and never returns, then that is a bit of exposure. So like if you want to see your community continue to grow, but one person's doing most of the impact and contributions, there's an opportunity to sort of siphon off some mentorship or ask more questions, or maybe even receive more documentation from this individual. Once I've dug in deeper to actually what their contributions are, I was able to identify that this one contribution, perhaps this was a high impact contribution, but majority of the contribution changes came from a bundle change. So when building the Webpack bundle, it looks like there was a lot of file changes and updates in there because this specifically is a performance change. So it actually touched one file pretty heavily. Now, chances are that if I ask this individual, hey, can you explain this change or can you document this improvement maybe in a blog post, they would actually turn around a blog post pretty well. And a lot of times what I do in the system of open source is I actually encourage most contributors, if you make a change to this size, if you could write more detail in your PR description, because I will take that and write a blog post. So my system is if there's big changes, things like we had dark mode implemented into one of our sites, that was an opportunity for a blog post. So I asked a contributor just to write a little bit more details, write specifically where they were blocked, where they got stuck, and it became an excellent blog post that we were able to reuse in other projects and share with other contributors. So I just want to point this out because insights are not graphs. Graphs are not contacts. And I think when we sort of just lean into like green squares and graphs, we don't really get the full picture of what's happening in the project, which is why I like this screen that we've created here. And so a lot of these screens are actually not live yet. So hopefully by the time this talk goes out, we'll have some of this actually live for folks. But what I'm saying, showing here is like these are all the contributions. So rather than seeing sort of these on-ramps and these orange blobs to see where contributions are coming from, we can actually see the actual legit contributions. We eventually want to like tie these contributions to releases and what packages these lie in. But for now, we've identified where the most impact is coming from, so that way we can start plugging people into a system. And like these systems look like this. So like this is a graph, but this graph provides a little bit more context where all the changes, and this project actually not, the previous project I was looking at was Next.js. This project is actually VS Code. And then here you can see the contributions in the last 30 days for VS Code. Majority of them are maintenance contributions. And the way we identify that, if there are package files, lock files and stuff like that, or YAML files, like all that gets updated, those are the majority of the updates inside of VS Code. Like there's some context missing here. Sorry, I'll highlight that too as well. But there's some context here that's missing that we can sort of eventually identify. But again, like we're looking for the triangle offense. We're looking for the place that, okay, if somebody is looking to make impact, we can identify places to inject them into the system. So imagine like new junior engineers or just new people on the team. Maintenance seems to be a very high impact place that folks can make impact quicker rather than try to put them in some place that maybe they found a nuanced bug. Like that's a great place to start. But like, where do we get people back into the system over and over again? Here's another graph which gives no insights, but what we're trying to really do is provide this 4-quadrant system where we can identify high impact up on the top right and low impact on the lower left. So here we got the lower impact folks who might be doing some small changes, might be manipulating files that aren't leveraged a lot in the project. And then we've got folks who are clearly providing a lot of impact or sort of like standing solo on their own. Like those are folks I need to reach out to provide documentation, updates. Maybe there's mentorship opportunities. Maybe they need to be promoted to a team lead if this is this is VS Code. So like this is mostly paid engineers, but or full-time employees, but bringing it out because like I want to provide more context into a lot of these projects. And at the end of the day, I think there's this opportunity here to identify contributions outside of the context of green squares. Because I think like at the moment, we've got a very big ecosystem of junior engineers and newbie programmers who are really excited about the idea of like filling in a square. And I know this has been problematic for years for a lot of communities and like a lot of maintainers who are just looking for folks to make contribution, but make like meaningful contributions. And these contributions don't have to be code. Like these contributions can be triaging issues. These can be answering questions in GitHub discussions, or it could just be triaging Stack Overflow questions. Like I think it's a missed opportunity. A lot of projects, they have questions that get opened up on Stack Overflow, but like we just don't get insight on windows that are open or no connection to GitHub. So I guess what I'm getting at is like I only have a bunch of ideas. I don't have a lot of solutions, but I'm interested in talking. If you're an open source maintainer, if you're at a company looking to grow your open source impact and contribution, I'd love to chat. I'm available on BWO on Twitter. I'm on BWO on GitHub, and OpenSauce.pizza is the project I'll be working on for the next couple months. I would love to get your feedback on that, and then maybe even give you a demo if you're interested. It's not a paid product today, so yeah, I'm not looking to sell you anything. I'm just looking to sort of figure out how we can solve problems together. Speaking of which, I sat down and I'm doing this series on YouTube where I'm sitting down with open source maintainers to talk about their insights and like how they got to the point where they are today. So I talked to Faraz about making money on open source. Faraz was created a tool called NPM Fun, which didn't work very well. So it doesn't exist anymore. But we talk about that conversation. We talk about how he just recently founded a company and sort of now he's sustaining himself through open source and whether that's the future for open source maintainers or if there's other possibilities. So I realized that like there's other solutions to make money on open source as well. Of course, Tidelift is a great one, and GitHub Sponsor is another great one. But what I'm getting at is you can contribute to open source at work, and it's something that I stand by. I know there's a lot of pushback on depending on like what company you work for, or if you work different verticals, like if you're in the government or whatnot. But I would say like there's a lot of opportunity for contributing open source. It doesn't have to be nights and weekends, but once you have the idea of like where you can contribute, where you can sort of plug in the system, I think everybody will be better for that. So I mentioned before, I'm BWO on GitHub. This is my profile page. And then finally, I'll just remind you, if you don't got sauce, then you lost.